I think if you want something, it leads to a deeper point. If you want something and you want something bad enough, go make it happen and find a way to make it happen. For most things in life, if you're passionate enough about something, you can find the people that'll help you to get there or will your way to make that happen. So that's one really important mental model that I've had and carried throughout my entire life.
Welcome to this week's As Unexpected podcast, when we talk to C-suite executives, entrepreneurs, and philanthropists about how they lead into the future when the future generally goes as unexpected. I'm Scott Marshall, your host, and my own professional experience has made me a believer that it's not how you show up when all goes as planned, but it is how you show up when things go as unplanned. Given all of their experiences, each of our guests has become very attuned to the fact that the future is not to be predicted. My hope is that this podcast can help all of you become better leaders by building the core leadership capabilities for leading in an uncertain world. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of As Unexpected. I'm your host, Scott Marshall, and our guest today has just a fascinating entrepreneurial background, a true citizen of the world, has led startups, has done all of the fascinating work that it takes to lead a startup and then have another startup and a family-run business. He's got multiple perspectives and multiple lessons learned. I'm thrilled to welcome Jordan Kaplan to the podcast. Jordan, welcome.
Thank you, Scott. Great to be here, and thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Jordan, if you don't mind starting off, just give our guests a sense of who you are. What's your professional background and what's your current work?
Absolutely. So I am the president of Bucketlist Xperiences. Bucketlist Xperiences is the number one membership for private jet expeditions around the world. So what we do is we take the top presidents, CEOs, and people in that sphere to the best places around the world and create the best in class experiences. We'll do things like we'll meet with President Kagame in Rwanda and then take his fleet of military helicopters into the jungle to go hiking with gorillas. We'll go to Egypt with the Minister of Antiquities and go down into tombs that were just discovered 2 weeks before we got there. We'll go to Bhutan and hang out with the royal family. So it's really pushing the envelope of what does bucket list mean and these experiences, along with always having the highest level of luxury and service along with that. So that's the focus right now. Been and done a lot before that, and that shaped me into where we are today. But we have a phenomenal team and doing some pretty cool things with that.
That does sound amazing. And I do want to hear more about the origin story of Bucketlist Xperiences. But could you also go back to your commitment to health and wellness and how that led to a startup many years ago and where you are with that particular company?
Yeah, absolutely. So my two biggest passions in life are travel and health and wellness. And my predominance of my professional career has always been on the business side of health and wellness. So I actually, we go way back to probably when I was in Babson. I went to school up in Babson in Boston, kind of was groomed into this of, I didn't really have a choice, not because I didn't want to, and it very much came intrinsically, but I think I was a little bit bred into being an entrepreneur and wanting that at some point. So when I was at Babson, I started really thinking about what does that look like long term. And actually way back then, I had the idea of creating an artificially intelligent personal trainer and nutritionist. So this is kind of way back then before it was really cool. And I didn't quite jump into that immediately, but I went to Equinox on the corporate strategy team. And that was a really great foundation because I went straight to New York and I was reporting right into our head of strategy and then one level below the C-level. So I was punching way out of my weight class right away, which was a great start. And I really got to, in that role, see the entire landscape of health and wellness. So it was a really, really good foundation and see that globally. At that time, I had this real focus of how do we take the Equinox brand and the brands under the portfolio to the Middle East and other regions beyond, where you wouldn't expect to see an equinox or a soul cycle or things like that. So really, really interesting and eye-opening in that global perspective. And that started a little bit with that global perspective. After that, I went into the healthcare space for a little while and then ended up starting my own company, Longevo, which still exists today, which is the #1 membership for one-on-one fitness and nutrition online for all of Latin America. Ran the company 100% Spanish. I'm half Chilean, half American, so that's a little bit of the origin there. And we realized there's this huge opportunity across Latin America to go and run this program there. So we basically started Longevo, and for $30 a month, you had unlimited access to a personal trainer and nutritionist all online. So we've expanded and the model's changed a little bit since then, but that's the predominance of what the focus is. Yeah.
Very cool. And what's your current role with that organization, with Longevo?
So I'm an advisor to the company now. Exited out of that company about 2-ish years ago now. Company is currently run by my co-founder, Andres Moreno, who is also the founder of Open English, which is the largest English learning platform in the world, in Latin America, and probably to be the world if it's not already. But he's a phenomenal person, and really he knew how to scale large kind of teams and humans and really scale that across Latin America, especially. I knew this health and wellness product side really well. So we put our two forces together and were able to go and create Longevo. And that was really the goal, to really bring that and spread that and democratize access to health and wellness all across Latin America. So we went and did that. And then at that time where I stepped out of Longevo, I was really looking for what was next. And at that time, my parents were actually running these trips called the Bucketlist Jet trips for an organization called YPO, Young Presidents Organization, which is the largest network of CEOs and presidents around the world. It's about almost, I think, 40,000 CEOs and presidents globally. And it would be the second largest country in the world by GDP if you add up all the revenues of those companies. So really, really interesting as an organization. And they were operating these trips as what they call chairs, or champions of the trips, where they basically said, hey, we can go and create these really amazing, impactful experiences for ourselves and our peers. And I said, this is way too amazing of what you're doing right now to not be operating as a business, listening and learning to the feedback of everybody that had been on their trips before. So I had actually went and served and worked for YPO as an operator on one of those trips. And then that's kind of how I realized that there was this huge opportunity to go and launch this as a business and really scale it beyond what it was back then.
Excellent. Thanks for laying out the origin story of that business. And how many employees do you have now in Bucketlist Xperiences?
Yeah, so we're a team of 7, trying to keep the team pretty lean. Over time, we'll continue to grow and scale. But right now, the focus is keeping us as lean as possible while having the necessary team that we need to. Fully remote. So we have our team all across between South Florida, Argentina, Turkey, Hawaii, Philippines. So we're all around the world and really distributed. And it's really critical for us to focus on our partners. So while we're a team of 7, we have our partners all over the world. So we work with the best in class people in any of the destinations that we go to. On the aircraft side, we work with the best in class teams there too. So while our full-time team is pretty lean, we're really focused on making sure we have the best in class partners wherever we work with.
That's great context for the heart and soul of this podcast. You've given sort of your startup background and then your current operation. So the heart and soul of this podcast is how do we show up as leaders when things don't go as we planned, whether it turns out better than we'd hoped or worse than we'd hoped. It really is the core of leadership from my own experience is how we show up when, we got to pivot, we got to turn, we got to U-turn, whatever it might be. And my guess is along your own entrepreneurial journey, there's been a few of those.
It's interesting because I learned a lot through the different businesses that I've been a part of. And really, I think the focus has been learn by doing, and this test and learn type of process. And one of my really unique superpowers is that ability to think on the fly, come up with how to solve problems. I was always the planner of the group. So if we go back to the semester at sea days, which was definitely one of the best experiences that I've had in my entire life. By far, I don't know if it's changed today, but we didn't have Wi-Fi on the boat. So you couldn't plan ahead for necessarily of where you were going, or your ability to do that was very limited. So you got to a destination and you just had to go and figure out what's my accommodation going to be for that night? What are the activities I'm going to do when you got to that destination, or a little bit of pre-planning and your previous destination before. But that's it. You didn't really have much time to think about it. I also went into the program not knowing anybody. So I made all my friends really by the first destination, but still, I didn't really know how many rooms to book in a hotel, how many people I'd be going with. So there was really there was no context to plan. So I always found that came naturally to me in being able to plan on that uncertainty. So you take that and travel, where naturally everything goes wrong all the time, is my baseline at least. And our goal is to, at least as a company, is to make sure that we have plans B through Z always ready to go in case we know whatever might go wrong. We can continue the experience to where, for the business, our members don't feel that experience. So we're in this constant state of uncertainty as we look across our trips, and knowing that while there is that level of uncertainty, we have the plans in place to balance that out.
This episode of As Unexpected is sponsored in part by Semester at Sea, a study abroad program for college students and adults on career breaks, sabbaticals, or retired, interested in learning and exploring the world together. Learn more about the Lifelong Learner program at www.semesteratsea.org. Lot to unpack there. What I want to start with is this core trait that you have, but others, I think, can, if they don't have it, they can certainly build it. And that is an understanding that you just got to be prepared with many contingencies. You got to live into the moment rather than plan the moment. Part of that, which you explained, if I'm going to articulate correctly, is you have a lot of contingencies, a lot of them thought through.
We do.
Yeah. I mean, clearly the clientele you're serving, you would need that. Even the clientele we're serving with our Semester C model, we have to have a lot of contingencies. We have to always think about from best case to worst case scenario and have plans accordingly. So with your fairly small team and a whole series of partners, how do you work on laying out multiple contingencies when serving a high wealth clientele who you don't want to be exposed to those changes, those alterations? How do you lay that out ahead of time?
So it's a really good question. And I think there's an important distinction is there's the member experience side, and then there's the business side. And there's many times where one thing that's best for one of those may not be the best for the other. We always prioritize the member experience side, because that is at its core how Bucketlist was founded, and really one of our key differentiators. So even if it's something that might potentially be not as good of a solution for the business, if it's a significantly better solution for the member experience side, we do that. And what we try to do as much as possible is really focus on pre-mortems versus post-mortems. So of course, we do our post-mortems at the end of every trip that we do, and really focus on learning from those and actually making changes from whatever those learnings are into future expeditions. But a big piece is doing the pre-mortem of really thinking about what can and what might go wrong and solving for that ahead of time. So, for example, we bring with us an entire security team that monitors our entire movements across the entire trip. But not only do they do that, they do an entire pre-mortem to kind of say, hey, this is what you might encounter along that trip. And then with those specific things, we'll put into place specific actions that if X happens, we do Y. And if Y happens, we do Z. So we have a very methodical process that's created prior to even leaving for that first destination of, if this happens, then we do X. And I think that comes a lot from my product side and tech world that I used to be in before, and translating that into this space, which that's a really strong competitive advantage for us to really focus on there.
Yeah. Some of our listeners may have heard of pre-mortems. I'm certainly they've heard of post-mortems, but pre-mortems, you got to look it up. What Jordan's talking about here is an essential skill, not just in the business world, but I think in the nonprofit world as well, perhaps even more relevant in the nonprofit world, which I live in. We definitely do pre-mortems. It's core to our planning cycles and everything we're doing around voyages. We have diversion ports. We have, different ways to deal with cancellations and so forth. So I really appreciate you emphasizing pre-mortems. The other thing you said that I want to explore a little more is the client experience, and the business impacts. And, you're a for-profit business. We're a nonprofit organization. We all have to do that. I mean, there's a great lesson you're talking about right here for anybody. I'm guessing word of mouth is one of your most powerful tools for getting future business.
It is.
Right?
We're really lucky that we have members that love us. So we have a 100% NPS. We have about an 80% repeat rate across our trips. And so we have people that'll have been with us now on 5 different jet expeditions, which if you think about that, the investment that they're spending with us and the time that they're spending with us, it really means a lot. And for those people to go and recommend a product like ours, an experience like ours to their close friends, that is something that we always highly value.
Yeah. And for, again, the audience, NPS, Net Promoter Score, a business that has 100 is in the top 0.0001% of anybody out there. The biggest brands in the world would be lucky to have a 40 or 45, an Apple or Microsoft or any Toyota would be lucky to hit 50. And here, Bucketlist Xperiences has 100. So you can tell that, in fact, Jordan and his colleagues prioritize the experience because that's how they get repeat business. That's brilliant. Thanks for articulating that. Jordan, this is a great time to transition to a quote I brought up. I picked this quote specifically for you. I just thought, given what I saw about your professional background before the podcast, this has got to resonate with Jordan. Now, if I'm wrong, I'm wrong, but I thought this guy maybe exemplifies not the philosopher, but maybe the quote for sure. So this goes back to a Danish philosopher back in the 19th century. Unfortunately, he died fairly early at the age of 42. But during his short life, he wrote a ton and some very interesting ideas that he put forth. The quote is this: "It is perfectly true, as philosophers say, that life must be understood backwards. But they forget the other proposition. It must be lived forwards." So I have my interpretation of that, but I put it to you, given all that you've accomplished for a relatively young individual and how you've lived forward while not forgetting what's happened in the past.
That's a really interesting quote. So I think we talked about the pre-mortem, post-mortem a little too early. That would have been perfect setup for that. But maybe it was, right? So I think there's a little bit of that piece. I'll give credit to whoever said this, and I'm blanking on whoever said this, but kind of listening to somebody say something or learning about historical events and just learning without actual change isn't actually learning, because you're not actually taking steps to go change forward. Rather, that's just maybe taking in knowledge, but there's no actual change that happens from there. So I think there's that component of learning from the past and living through the past experience is really critical, but it's that forward piece of taking that and how do you actually carry that forward? And also looking into the future and forecasting and bringing that forward into what am I doing today? So there's a little bit of, when we think about how do we create experiences for Bucketlist? We look at the past experiences of what did people love? What were really the highlights across the private jet experience? What were the highlights across the certain destinations, the people? We learn and listen to all of that, and we take that and we implement that going forward. But we also look at what's coming ahead in the future. What do people not know about? And to the extent we have to create something that people might not even know that they really want. So there's a new destination that just opened up to the world called the Red Sea in Saudi Arabia. And this is new even to the Saudis, where this is a whole development, and it's one of the few giga projects that they're building across Saudi. And really, really amazing what they're building in terms of hotel accommodations, experiences. I'm a big scuba diver, so it has some of the most untouched reefs in the world. So it's beyond incredible, beyond beautiful. So we're going to be taking our group of travelers there this upcoming November to experience that just opening brand new. So we're always looking for those really interesting experiences of how do we forecast in the future? What do we look for going ahead, and then pull that forward into today?
Yeah, there you go. I might also suggest that you personally, given what you've shared thus far in this session, is that you also seem to exemplify this saying, and that certainly you take lessons from the past, but you seem to have this own personal willingness to live into the future, even with all of its uncertainty. And you've explained your semester C experience, your experience with Longevo, and now with Bucketlist Xperiences. But I am curious if you could try to articulate where this sense of living forward amidst the uncertainty comes from. Where's is that inherent, or was that learned? Was that some combination? I think a lot of people can get value from understanding how you do it.
It's a great question. And I think it's only through experience. I've done enough now to know a lot about it. I'm missing a lot. There's still so much more for me to learn, but I've done enough now to learn what I really don't like and what I do like. And I know there's certain things, for example, that I thrive under uncertainty. And I just know that's where I perform really well. So when I think about, how do I control for that? It's interesting because I like having a lot of control over the situations that I'm in. I'm a very organized person. I like creating that organization, but I like being able to do that in a world of uncertainty. Doing the same thing every day, doing the monotonous thing every day, that doesn't excite me. Rather, this world of uncertainty and excitement and lack of maybe security or safety, that's where I think a lot of the color is in life, actually. So I really dip into a lot of that. And that's just where I've realized I thrive. And the only way I've realized that is by doing. I started interning at companies when I was 15 years old. I've had my own startups and businesses as small as a lemonade stand and a photography company and this and that in between. So just a lot of trial and error. And the experiences that I've been through, it's been a little bit of the nature and nurture combined through that.
Yeah. What's great about what you said, I think the power is in that what you said, I stay very organized. I think about how to structure much of what you're trying to accomplish. And at the same time, you embrace and move into the uncertainty.
Absolutely.
So a lot of people might think, oh, I got to have it all organized and structured and not do well living into the uncertainty. Others may say, well, it'll just unfold as this unfolds, and they didn't lay out any organizational structure. You're embracing both.
And I think what you're saying, the word embrace, that's a really important word that you're bringing up, because when we explore anything that we do, whether I do it personally in my life or for the business, and I talk to our team, I would say what we do is logistically crazy complex. But the frame that you have to put on it is, this is a giant puzzle, and I'm going to embrace this complexity, embrace this uncertainty, embrace this, and I'm not going to just say, oh, I know it can happen, but I'm trying to avoid it. I think embracing it rather than avoiding it is really that key frame and switch. And that's what has allowed us to be really successful.
Yeah, love it. Planning does not avoid uncertainty.
No, definitely not.
Yes,
Definitely
love
not.
it. Love it. This is awesome. So we're about at time. I think I'd love to finish. You've shared a lot of wisdom already, but if we could finish off, and if you were to go back to your 20-year-old self, we have 19 to 22-year-olds on the voyage currently. If you could give that person advice, what would be the one thing you'd like to, you only had a few minutes and you'd say, listen, take this with you. What would it be?
A few things. Go petition the hell out of your school to let you on semester at sea. I actually had to petition my school for 3 years to let me get the credits to do that. And I finally was able to do that. So I think if you want something, it leads to a deeper point. If you want something and you want something bad enough, go make it happen, and find a way to make it happen. For most things in life, if you're passionate enough about something, you can find the people that'll help you to get there, or will your way to make that happen. So that's one really important mental model that I've had and carried throughout my entire life. The other is exposure, and experiences. As early as possible, I would tell myself have as much of that as I could possibly have, to both people, to places, to trying things, seeing the world, I think is just super helpful in that global understanding of what is out there in the world. And that's everything from the good and the bad, the ugly and the great. It's having that full exposure really helps you to understand anything that you might encounter at a deeper level. So those are the two immediate things that come to mind, of a little bit of words of wisdom to my past life.
If you want it, you got to make it happen, and make sure what you're making happen exposes you to the world. Love it. Hopefully I encapsulated that. Jordan, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for taking the time. Again, hopefully we'll meet up in person in the future.
Absolutely. Good to see you, Scott. We'll see you soon.
All right. This episode of As Unexpected is sponsored in part by Semester at Sea, a study abroad program where students visit 10 countries on 3 continents, all while taking 3 to 4 college classes through Colorado State University. See course offerings and upcoming voyage itineraries at www.semesteratsea.org. Thank you for joining this week's episode of the As Unexpected podcast. The viewpoints and opinions of featured guests do not necessarily represent those of the Institute for Shipboard Education or Semester at Sea. Hit the like button, share it with your colleagues, family, and friends, and remember, be curious, be compassionate, be courageous. That's what it takes to lead as unexpected.